Hey readers and writers, I'm Adrian Buskey, and you're listening to Fictitious, a podcast about the storytelling craft of science fiction and fantasy. This episode was recorded live this past summer at San Diego Comic-Con 2019. It's a panel discussion called 10 Points to Slytherin, Why Good Fans Love Evil Characters, and it features an awesome group of writers, including Marissa Meyer, Renée, Ahdieh, Keto, Shimizu, Shaun, Barger, and Caitlin Starling. I've done this panel at a number of different conventions, and I love how each group of speakers brings unique observations to this examination of villains and why we find them so compelling. It's an entertaining and thought-provoking discussion from a fandom perspective, and there's also a lot to chew on for writers who want to create great antagonists. Since this is a live recording, the audio quality is a bit all over the place, and some speakers are louder than others. But we had a blast with an enthusiastic crowd, and I think you'll have a lot of fun with this one too.
Hi, everybody. Thank you for coming out to join us late into the evening on Friday here at Comic-Con. Really appreciate everybody coming to show up. I'm going to officially declare this SDCC After Dark.
Yes.
Let's take this one to the bad place. You're at 10 Points to Slytherin, Why Good Fans Love Evil Characters. My name is Adrian Buskey. I am the host of the Fictitious podcast, which is all about the storytelling craft of science fiction and fantasy. A couple of the authors who are on this panel have actually been on the show before, so you should go check those out. What we're going to be exploring today is what makes fan fascination with bad characters. We know that antagonists in film and books and all other kinds of storytelling are sometimes the most fun, the sexiest, the most engaging characters out there. And pop culture has really come to revere the bad guy. We want to kind of pull that apart and figure out what makes that tick. With all the writers on this panel, we want to find out who their favorite characters are and why, and then find out what sometimes can make a story go unbalanced if we end up caring too much about the bad guy and maybe the good guys isn't exciting. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start right here with Caitlin. We're going to go down the line and have each one of you introduce yourselves and tell us about your work.
Hi, I'm Caitlin Starling. I'm the author of a book called The Luminous Dead, which came out from Harper Voyager this past April. Quick version is traumatized lesbians in caves. Longer version is woman lies her way onto a caving expedition expecting a lot of surface support while she's down there alone. She gets one woman. That woman is lying to her, and that's just the beginning.
It's also excellent. It's really, really good and really tense.
Thank you.
Hello, I'm Marissa Meyer. I'm the author of the Lunar Chronicles, which is essentially fairy tales set in space. The author of Heartless, which tells the origin story of the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. And my newest series is the Renegades Trilogy, about a girl named Nova who's been raised by a group of super villains. And she despises a group of superheroes called the Renegades and is determined to bring them down. That is until she meets and starts to fall in love with a boy who happens to be a renegade. And so as the two of them are falling in love, developing feelings for each other, at the same time, they don't know that their alter egos are becoming arch enemies.
Hi, everyone. My name is Renée, Ahdieh. I'm the author of the Wrath and the Dawn series, which is a reimagining of the Arabian Nights set in a fantasy Persia. My second series is Flame in the Mist, which is in fantasy feudal Japan. My book that's coming out in October is the first of four, and it is a vampire murder mystery set in 1872 New Orleans.
Hi, everybody. I'm Shaun Barger, debut novelist, author of Mage Against the Machine from Saga Press. I brought it.
He's the only good student, and this is what we were going to do with it when you put it up, because he's the only one. It's a panel about villains. Come on. This is Slytherin. 10 points to Slytherin.
True.
It's After Dark. SDCC After Dark.
Paperback comes out on July 30th, so you should probably buy it.
My name is Keto Shimizu. I'm an EP and writer on Legends of Tomorrow. And yeah, unlike these people, all these fancy authors, I just make television. So it's yeah, you guys are like real writers. But yeah, I've been writing for TV for nearly a decade on shows like The Cape and Being Human and Arrow and now Legends of Tomorrow. That's awesome.
Yeah, not fancy at all,
yeah.
right? All right, so one of the first things I want to know here is if you guys have a house allegiance, right? Like, obviously this thing's called 10 Points to Slytherin. This isn't a Harry Potter panel. However, those kinds of identifications matter to us, right? Like, those are things that we really, like, embrace. And I say this as a Griffin claw, right? If that makes sense to y'all in here. Like, I can't even make up my mind. I'm two houses. It's starting back down there with you, Keto. Like, can you tell us, like, if you have a house affiliation
I do.
from kind of
And
piece of fiction?
I'm a very proud Hufflepuff, y'all. And I resisted it for a little bit, but then every personality test I took confirmed it. And you know what? I've come to embrace it. You know, like I am definitely, if I had gone to Hogwarts, I definitely would have been the one trying to do like the inter-house parties. Like, come on, everyone, let's just get along. Like, yeah, that's totally me. So,
Shaun?
I was going to say Griffin Puff. Like, I really am drawn to Hufflepuff for those very reasons. But, Gryffindor, they're cool. They're just cool. So it's like, I feel like a lot of people, you're what did you say you are?
I'm a Griffin claw.
Yeah.
I have the heart of a Gryffindor, but, like, I think too much. So, yeah. I like to read.
I relate to that, but with the puff. The Hufflepuff. Yeah.
I'm definitely a Slytherin. Every single, it's so funny that everybody celebrates like, yes, the evil house, yay. Well, when I first started, when I was a kid, I kept getting Slytherin, and I didn't want to tell anybody that, so I lied and told everybody it was a Gryffindor, which honestly, lying about your Hogwarts house, can you get any more Slytherin than that? Yeah.
Confirmed. I'm very Ravenclaw, very much a Ravenclaw. Yay, my Ravenclaw friends. I'm thinking too much. And reading too much, and totally.
It's Housewell, actually.
Yeah. Although I will say, as far as like Hufflepuffs go, for a long time it was like everyone was like, I don't want to be Hufflepuff. Like they're the nerdy ones, and now I feel like all the Hufflepuffs have really embraced Hufflepuff does.
It's like we're
and I have
pretty
like this
tough. I think there's like this misnomer of like, oh, Hufflepuffs are kind of wimpy and we're pushovers. Like, no, man, we are loyal to death.
Yeah.
Like, come at me,
so
bro.
kind,
like, I will take you on.
We have so many friends, and now there's a part of me that's like, oh, I wish I was a Hufflepuff.
So I'm going to break the mold. I honestly have no idea. I have never actually known where I would fit. I guess I actually need the Sorting Hat, but I will say, as someone who is wearing a Dragon Age t-shirt, that I am definitely a Ferelden dog lord above all else. So
I don't know what those words mean.
for the small portion of people in the audience who do, though, it's very important.
It's good to find your tribe. Everybody likes the call out that's like, oh, that one was just for me, right?
I think we'll have you sorted into a Harry Potter house by the end of this panel.
Yes.
Okay.
We'll have this figured out. I've talked enough with Caitlin, and I think there's a Slytherin sitting next to us. I'm just saying. At this point, we don't have to go down the line. We can just jump in. But I want to know, who is your favorite villain in storytelling, pop culture in general? And if they're your favorite because you identify with them in some way, and if so, why is that, and how does that make you feel?
Oh, goodness. I mean, I do have several favorites, so it's kind of hard to pick, but I guess I'll say three very different ones that sort of outline, I think, some good pinnacles of villainy. Magneto, Gollum, and Two-Face. Those are my three probably pinnacles of villainy. And Magneto, because, he's got this incredible story. You totally understand why he has this point of view. And again, he's got this very complex relationship, both with his, enemy and with his brethren. And I've always found him just very, very fascinating. And Gollum, because like that poor guy is just sick. Like he's got a mental illness, and like it's a drug analogy. Like he's an addict and he's very ill. I also feel like that is something that makes a very compelling villain, someone who's just sick. Yeah. And then Two-Face for a very similar reason, but Two-Face because he tries to get better. He really does try to literally see the other side of it, and really he's always literally in that battle of identity of, am I good, am I bad? Like, am I ever going to be able to reconcile the two? So those are my three faves.
So I'm going to also have more than one. I have two that come to mind. The first, back to the Dragon Age thing, which, by the way, are there any Dragon Age fans in this room? Woo. Thank you. So back from Dragon Age Origins, Logan Mcteer, because he has that sort of, you can understand why he's doing it, but he's doing it in absolutely the worst way possible and letting himself be manipulated by people around him to push him farther towards the dark side. I'm really interested in that sort of contextual villainy of are the actions themselves villainous, or is the purpose behind them villainous in a world where there aren't only supervillains? It's a whole wide mix of political inclinations, and it's a fantasy setting, so a lot of people are getting killed all the time. The other one is not just because of my last name, but is Hannibal Lecter. And he was an early favorite in my life and has stuck around very persistently. And that's just pure style points.
I would have to say I have two as well. The first one is Zuko from Avatar: The Last Airbender. I love Zuko so much. And the reason is because his characterization is so nuanced. It's so layered. And you sort of watch him. I don't want to do any spoilers. I mean, this show's been out for a long time, right? So I can.
Spoilers.
All right, fine. All right. So for him to go from being, sort of this like Aang's arch nemesis to seeing sort of like the background behind all this. And then also like Uncle Iroh is one of my favorite characters of all time. And to sort of see that relationship unfold throughout the course of these stories, it's beautiful. And I find it, I rewatch Avatar: The Last Airbender every year, and it's always compelling, and I always find something new with it. I think it's one of the most perfect shows ever created. And then my second most favorite villain, because I promised, is Marissa Meyer, who is evil despite her yellow dress. It's deceptively sunny. I did say I would do that.
She's always giggling. It's a lie.
Big smile. It's so deceptive.
She claims to be a Ravenclaw. You can know better. Where were we? What were we talking about?
Villains.
For me, I was actually, before this panel, I had this 10-minute, let's quickly look up villains so that I have people to talk about, because I had a lot of wine this afternoon. But no, I think for me, probably my favorite villain is the Joker. And again, with style points,
Which iteration of the Joker?
Which Joker?
Well,
Which Jokers we talking?
So tricky.
Keith, I have to say.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah.
Yeah.
God, he was so good.
He was so good.
I mean, he's over the top evil, but just so out there. And I think that's one of the things that I love about really great villains in general, is that they are so bold and reckless and unapologetic. And that's one of the things that I just really love about the Joker. He is larger than life in every way possible. And he's just so fascinating to watch. Another favorite for me that I actually wrote a book about is the Queen of Hearts from Alice in Wonderland. I, loved that story and grew up on Alice in Wonderland. And there's this character that's, off with her head, and she's so iconic and so big and bold in the story. But Lewis Carroll gives us very little information. And so when I decided to go back and write an origin story for the Queen of Hearts, there was so much to play with there. And I just wanted to delve into this character and find out, what is it about her that makes her so angry and so furious with the world? Why does she just go off at the smallest thing and ready to kill anyone that crosses her path? And I was just so curious and interested in her character and trying to bring her to life. So she's definitely one of my favorites as well.
I am a little torn between Zuko and Azula and Blue and Yellow from Steven Universe.
Oh, wow.
I'm really drawn to sibling villains because I think there's such a human connection between them that is really interesting and complicated and can be messy. And it can be really loving, like you see with Blue and Yellow, even though they're fascists. They're fascist crystal aliens. And then with Zuko and Azula, they're competitive, but they're still connected. And you see such vulnerability between them. Like you see the beach episode, and it's so good. And you see them both so vulnerable.
Yeah.
And you see them both so messy. But,
and
villain,
so resentful afterwards, too.
So resentful and so hurt. I think villainy is about choices. And so you see, Blue and Yellow, I mean, I'm not going to spoil anything. They're fine. But, you see Azula and Zuko kind of go very different ways because they make very different choices. And to be fair, they had, really different kind of mentor figures. Yes. Yeah, so I think it's a tie between those two pairings.
You guys are such an author panel as far as everybody's well, I've got 35 and I brought notes, so we're ready. I love it. Being here at Comic-Con, just seeing cosplayers and people in the shirts and stuff like that, you'll see a lot of villain representation walking around. At what point do you think that having a fandom for the villains became socially acceptable? You know, I mean, just thinking about like, you know, what characters kind of broke it open and at what point could society as a whole go, yeah, liking the bad guys is cool.
Well, I mean, maybe not so like on a society level for general villains, but Moriarty had a bunch of fans, pretty sure, in Victorian England Sherlock stories. Dracula, obviously. But I think probably society level, and I am not a scholar of this in any way, I would guess Star Wars.
I was thinking Darth Vader.
I would honestly, I would say Darth Vader, and just how visually iconic, but also abstracted the villain he was. So it was just kind of like, okay, cool, I can don the outfit, and it's not with this whole host of, you know, this litany of crimes. It's just, oh, they're the bad guys. And they're kind of a nice, at that point, a nice, simple, it's good, it's bad, you pick one.
Yeah. But also Darth Vader was so human in so many ways. I mean, he had a really fully fleshed out backstory, and as you know, the movies went on and you got to know more about him, and obviously the father-son relationship and the choices that he makes, and the depth to him, I think really made the fans accept him and appreciate him for more than just the bad guy doing bad things.
Yeah. Like he was this towering monster. And like there was a really big gap in those old movies coming out. Like, you know, it was like Star Wars was the first big genre thing that we get like every 3 months now. But like what was the gap between like, you know,
one of them was like I think 6 years.
Yeah.
Right? Like between
Yeah. So like, you know, in the first movie, like Vader is just this monster. He's terrifying. He's like the design is great and all that. And then slowly you like, you know, over the like, what was it, like over 8 years or something of those movies coming out, you realize he's this messy, tragic human, and you see the helmet taken off and he's not James Earl Jones, which is weird.
Yeah.
But, you know, he's desiccated. You're like, oh, he's not even James. And
he's terribly pale, that one.
He's not looking good. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
I do think, like, I feel like it's kind of an eternal fascination. I don't know, as long as
I agree.
I can think of, like, stories and mythology and things, I feel like people have always kind of loved the villains or at least been fascinated by them, even in the Bible. I mean, I just think it's, whenever there's been a story and there's been a bad guy, I think people have always been curious, like, what makes them tick. So I don't think it's, like, a new thing.
I agree.
I mean, certainly, I've already said it. Sorry, it's been a long day.
I feel like for me, it's, I would probably even go back to, I agree. I don't think it's something that's a recent phenomenon. I think Mary Shelley's Frankenstein actually explores this exact topic. And I think when I'm talking, because I often work with teenagers because I write for young adults, I feel like with them, the thing that sort of gave them permission to really love villains was probably Severus Snape. Like if I talk to like teen readers, because again, that same idea, what we're talking about, these characters there, like kind of like a Darth Vader, where you start to realize that this person that you just thought was like pure evil and just like nothing redemptive about this person at all. And you discover there's this rich backstory and this rich history that doesn't excuse their behavior by any means. Because I mean, and I think even J.K. Rowling said this, he's not a good person. Like don't necessarily revere him. He's done terrible things. He's been a bully, but he also has this beautifully broken past. So yeah.
Something that I think you guys have already kind of hit on a little bit here, but I want to talk about like the anatomy of a great villain. And I don't mean like anatomy, like, you know, we're not talking about Loki or anything specifically, right? Or like villains who can get it. We'll get there.
20-pack, yeah.
But from a storytelling standpoint, what are the elements you think that really make a bad guy work in a story and make us feel very compelled from story mechanics, but also that can be visuals and films or voice or swagger, all those things?
Swagger is a great word.
Yeah. I'd argue intimacy. Either the villain's intimacy with the hero because of, you know, they have a close relationship where the villain is fixated on the hero or something like that, or with the audience, as in we get to see the backstory, we get to see what came before. And so we feel this connection because we either have been shown or we are part of a relationship with the villain. You know, at first Darth Vader was the distant figure. There wasn't really a relationship there. But again, he grew in popularity as we learned more about his backstory and as he gained this intense relationship with his son and with everyone else in the cast. And it crops up again and again, I feel like. I mean, I mentioned Hannibal, that there's your case study in intimacy with the villain leading to great popularity of, you know, the whole good evening Clarice and the whole psychoanalysis back and forth that just fixes him in everyone's head when they see Silence of the Lambs or when they read the book.
Yeah, and I think like a lot of most villains have a very flawed view of the world and how it should be. I mean, certainly flawed to our hero because they fight them and, they prevail usually. But the thing about that worldview I think the really compelling villains is that there is a very compelling reason for why they have that view. And I think that's the really interesting, complicated relationship that can be built both between hero and villain and audience. When you understand, like, okay, they went through some shit, or, they got their heart broken, they were abused, blah, blah, blah. It's all these things, all these factors that went into building this messed up view of the world. And these villains are the heroes of their own story. I mean, they are doing what they feel is right. They, otherwise they wouldn't be doing it. And I think when you build that up in a way that is understandable and is dramatized in a way that you're like, okay, yeah, if I was in that situation, I might do that. I probably wouldn't because, again, I'm more grounded in that person, or I'm not as sick as that person, or X number of factors. But it's like it's a flawed worldview, but a reason for that worldview.
You can understand, even if you are not particularly villainous or you don't think you're particularly villainous, you can see how they arrived there.
Yeah. I think the most compelling villains are the ones, I don't want to sympathize with them, but I want to empathize with them. I want to be able to sit back and be like, aha, so I could conceivably believe that this is a possibility, like with your backstory, or even just where you're coming from it within this certain, like what, I can't remember his name because I'm totally blanking. The one from Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse, who's the villain, like his name?
Kingpin.
I love that backstory for the same reason, even though I find him obviously morally repugnant, but I think he's a great villain.
So what do you think, though, about characters who are evil for the sake of being evil? I mean, in some ways, in some iterations, even the Joker is like that. But the power is in, I guess, how far they go, and they go past even the bounds of, like, you're like, oh wow, you're into it.
Yeah.
But where
again,
do those
people are psychopaths. I mean, like, again, like, he's sick. Like, Joker has an illness, and that's why he has no empathy for any other human being, and he delights in the violence and the chaos and the crazy. I mean, again, some people are sick, and I feel like he's an example of that. And again, he does it with such style, and, and it's a lot of fun to watch.
There's something about a villain who is doing things that are horrible, that are, completely despicable, that you would never agree with or think is okay. But if they do it with such flash and such charm, and, there's a part of you that can't help but be a little swept away by that, a little intrigued by that. And I don't know if that's just because it's so different. I know for me, I hate confrontation. I hate arguing. I like peace and everything to be nice and, don't fight, don't argue. But there's a part of me that I see these villains who are, so ruthless and so determined and so willing to do whatever it takes to get whatever it is they're trying to get. There's a part of me that can't help but admire that on some levels.
They have such clear motivation, and they're very active in their own stories. Like, they are either central to or an avatar or representation of the conflict in the story. And they're like, they're so about it. Like, you're going to meet them in the midst of their mission, whatever their mission is. They're honestly easier to write because you're like, okay, like, this is how I have to present them. This is who they are. This is what they're about. And these are the choices they are making right now.
Yeah.
I do think that swagger, it's not required because Gollum certainly does not have a lot of swagger, but confidence.
But he's got a catchphrase.
Confidence covers over a lot of sins, at least initially. And it sort of lets you get swept away before you get eased into the maybe empathizing and the understanding of you're going, this is someone I want to watch on screen or I can't look away from on screen. And it hooks you for long enough that as the story unfolds, you're still there and you're still invested.
I think there was an interesting point that was made in there, I think it was Shaun, that you're talking about the idea that the villain knows what they want, where, like, if you follow any of kind of the standard story beats, it's all about the hero not knowing what they want or being confused for a long time and then being kind of inevitably forced to, like, come to, like, the conclusion, like, now this is my mission, I must do this. Whereas the villain starts off right at the beginning, like, I know what I want, right? And I think there's something kind of, like you said, it's that confidence that comes from knowing what you want to do.
And like in real life, like really bad people are people who have latched onto a toxic narrative. And they like believe it to be true. Like they believe it to the point that they'll do whatever.
I want to talk about, since like mentioned kind of the hero and in their situation, what about a great villain amplifies the hero? And what about that contrast makes a story sing and really makes a narrative shine?
For me, it's when neither of them get what they want. I love stories that explore where even if at the beginning the hero or heroine doesn't understand what it is that they want specifically or how to get there, they have an arc that's clear to the reader because that's what compels us forward. Like whether it's that they've lost family members or they're on a quest mission, you have the Bildungsroman or something like that. You have all this stuff going on here, but that they don't get what they want and neither does the hero, and that what they want starts to change throughout the course of the story. That to me is really, really important because I believe that the best stories are often based in the villain. Like, because that's the best stories are propelled by conflict, and the best conflict comes from, even if a villain isn't a person. Like one of my recent reads that I've loved so much is Naomi Novik's Uprooted. It's such an amazing book, and the villain in this book is a sentient forest. So it's not a person, and this forest has an ulterior motive of wanting to essentially like take over all parts of the world and suck it up into its bleak world where everyone's like a stick figure and everything like that. It's so wonderful because like how do you give this forest an agenda? And to me, that's what makes every scene in that book, it propels it forward because they're all trying to stop the spread of this evil wood.
I'm a big fan, and you may know this if you have read any of my book, is of antagonists or villains that reflect something back of the protagonist, and it's something that either they're not aware of about themselves or that they are ashamed to confront.
Yeah.
And I really love that foil setup of you're telling the same story down two different paths, but the choices they're making are different, but their contexts are different. And both characters are basically providing a framework to understand the other one. And you can't untangle them without losing some depth of character on the other side.
Yeah, I think a good villain should fundamentally challenge the hero's point of view of the world and how it should work, and really make them question and have to commit to a path and to a set of tasks or whatever, like the hero's, the journey of it. But I think a really good villain really turns that all on its head and should make the hero question everything, so that as they move forward and they overcome that obstacle, they really know who they are.
Because heroes question and villains don't. Villains are just like, I know what's right. I got this. Like, it's fine to kill all those people. Whatever. I'm doing some important stuff right now.
I'd also say that a great villain pushes the hero. So often you see stories where the villain starts out in a position of a lot of power, a lot of strength, and the hero is the exact opposite. And so, very classic hero story, the hero has to continually grow and build themselves up and get stronger and stronger to the point where they might actually be able to fight and overcome the villain. And I think that's such an important role for the villain that, if they start out evenly matched, then there's really nowhere for the hero to go. It's really the villain that's providing that catalyst for the hero to have to learn about themselves, to develop new strengths, to venture out on this quest, whatever the story may be. And without the villain, pushing them and driving them, then there wouldn't be much story there.
Yeah. Where's the line in the villain becoming the more interesting part of the story? Because I think we've seen some films or read some books where there's a point where you're like, the hero's maybe too milquetoast or too indecisive or just doesn't have the same interest level where the villain really grabs you.
I mean, that's when the writer's just not doing their job. Yeah. Like, it's because it is like, you can tell when the writer is having fun. You can tell when the writer's really enjoying writing a passage. And you can tell when a writer really likes writing one character and it's kind of just like, I want to get back to that other character. I got to finish this stuff. And I think you get that a lot with heroes and villains because villains have clear motivation. They have clear, they're very active in their own stories. And heroes are honestly a little more complicated because they're trying to be good, and being good is hard. And so it's harder to write that well. You have to be really thoughtful about a good hero. And you don't have to be as thoughtful to be a good villain because it's just someone who latched onto a toxic narrative and they're really acting on it.
Yeah, it's really, really easy to accidentally write a stock character hero, especially if for whatever reason, you don't want to write a particularly dramatically conflicted or anti-hero type hero, and you really want to tell the story of a person who really wants good and wants to do good. It can sometimes be tricky to find what specifically makes that interesting and what specifically makes that character want to be good in a specific way, because, in a lot of, it's really easy to default to, well, he's good or she's good. And, you come up with some details that sort of shore that up, but you never really explore it. Because exploration, at least for me, often leads to some very dark places, and sometimes you don't want your hero character to go there, and so you're left going, okay, well, where do I take them instead?
Is there any particular villains where you can think of off the top of your head that you feel like really did steal the show? And not necessarily in an unbalanced way, but where you're like, this is the character that I just had the most fun watching, or that you just felt like just really shined in a narrative?
Sephiroth from Final Fantasy VII.
Yeah.
Let's say Loki.
I think Spike.
Yeah.
Yeah, a little bit.
I agree with
Loki.
Yeah.
All the Batman villains ever. The reason I fell in love with storytelling and wanted to make TV was Batman the Animated Series, and it wasn't because of, I loved Batman. Kevin Conroy is forever my Batman, but those villains were amazing, and they were the show. Yes, Batman was in it, and Batman did cool things and had fun action sequences, and solved crimes, but every episode was really pulling you into the villain's tragic story, and Batman trying to save them. Ultimately, it wasn't about yes, he had to save the people they were hurting, but it was also he was also so invested in their story, and therefore the audience was really invested in their story, and they 100% stole the show.
Yeah, Lex Luthor.
Much more interesting.
Yeah, don't kill me, but I don't. Superman, come on, your flaws are rock. Anyway, okay, sorry.
So with you on that.
Wah, wah.
How healthy is it for us as readers, as viewers, as fans in general, to empathize or identify or explore ourselves through the villain? Because definitely the villains give us some leeway to do that, and whether we're taking some sort of gratification in the freedom that they seem to feel. But at what point are we, staring into the abyss and letting it stare back at us?
I think generally it's pretty healthy, especially in figuring out where your personal boundaries are, what you draw the line at. Generally speaking, heroes aren't going to show you where that is. Mm-hmm. But villains, it's sort of built into their narrative that they're going to push boundaries, and you, the audience member, get to decide if it's something that you can empathize with and understand, if it's something that's completely right out and it doesn't interest you anymore because it's maybe become too real. And I think that, that it lets us explore the ambiguous sides of ourselves in a safe way.
Yeah, absolutely. As I'm sitting here and I'm thinking about Superman and I guess our mutual disdain for his weakness, I think for me, my favorite heroes and my favorite villains are flawed in a multifaceted way. I don't just want you to be somebody who your mom left you as a baby and that has been the only defining thing of your life. There has to be layers to this. And I definitely understand. But I also think, going back to what Shaun said, it's sort of bad writing if your villain or your hero is very one note, and their flaws are surrounding something that's you need to build upon that. And for me to get behind either a villain or a hero or a story in general, I have to really understand these characters' flaws and sort of live in them and empathize with it.
Is there a limit to us romanticizing the villain?
Nazis.
I'm
gonna draw the line there. I'm sorry.
Yeah, fascists in general.
Fascists in general, yeah.
I do see a lot of people who kind of maybe fetishize a Harley and Joker, and you're like, that's a
very toxic relationship.
Yeah, really unhealthy relationship.
Yeah.
And they're both, hot and fun and cool, but it's not good. It's not good.
Personally, realistic crime, especially rape, is a no-go for me. I know it's not for everybody because it does, again, you get to explore certain things about how you think about things. But to me, a rapist villain where that's the main thing that they do, I'm not going to find that interesting. No. It's a little bit too real. It's not a villain. It's an actual real bad thing that, I'll read stories and I have enjoyed stories that explore that experience and, in nuanced ways, but it's not something where I would stand the villain.
Mm-hmm. Those moments in Buffy, when Angel tries to assault Buffy, that. I mean, not Angel, Spike. Sorry. Whew. Like that almost like it broke it for me. I was just like, do you ever get to the point where you're just like, that doesn't feel like this character did this evil thing. It felt like the writers made a mistake.
Yeah.
Because it's like, it's such a sadistic animal thing.
Yeah.
So gross and unforgivable.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is there a moment where we are celebrating the intrinsic evil of these characters too much, in the sense that, this goes back to romanticization, but like when we look at some the tropes that we see sometimes that will appear, like particularly like in prose, where you have characters that there's like the enemies to lovers, kind of thing, or you have super, super toxic characters who are also kind of the love interest. And even after they've been established as the bad person, the fandom's still like, oh, but I really wanted those two to get together, even though he's 1,000,000 years old and really terrible and wants to kill everybody and treats her like an owned thing. And I could be referring to about a dozen different popular books with that reference. Yeah. So if you were like, I know which one, there was a bunch there.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like, so, I mean, as writers, do you hit a point where, like, do you feel a certain like a moral responsibility when writing these characters to be mindful of how the audience might embrace it? And then after, if people get really hung up on those characters in that way, like where they do kind of fetishize them, like, how do you handle that?
I mean, what you put out there is a reflection of your own morality. So if you put some gross stuff out there, people are going to know you're gross. So, like,
period. Mic drop. Well, I mean, as somebody who writes for young adults too, I feel like a really strong compulsion to not glorify abusive, like, heroes, like abusive love interests, because I don't want like my nieces, for instance, thinking that like, that this sort of thing is sexy. I don't want, and if it happens in one of my books, I want somebody, there's a call out of it, that this is not appropriate behavior, this isn't good. And one of the things I'm exploring right now with the sequel to The Beautiful is the idea of what a real hero is, because we have this buildup in our world of, like what a strong male hero is. And I really want to dismantle that, because I think it's all wrapped in very much in toxic masculinity. And we glorify this toxic masculinity, and we teach our girls to vie for the attention of toxic males. And I don't want that in any of the books I'm writing.
I like to keep in mind too, if I'm writing, so Luminous Dead can potentially be described as enemies to lovers in some ways, but in my mind, the reason why it works for me and it interests me, and it's why I want to tell one of those stories, is I wouldn't say that the antagonist is a villain necessarily. I would say that she is 100% an antagonist to the protagonist, and she has done questionable things, and there's a lot of twisty morality to explore there, and that's really meaty and interesting. But I'm also not trying to write a story and then say, and then they lived happily ever after and they had no issues and they never had to go to couples therapy. I like exploring stories that go to potentially uncomfortable places and that go to places that maybe I wouldn't want to be in, but I find interesting to explore. And I think especially romanticizing villains or building them up into some kind of romantic interest within the story lets you do that, again, in a safe way. It's kind of, this is SDCC After Dark, little bit like BDSM play of exploring within a safe area with fiction and agreeing that it's fiction being the safe area. But you also need to take care of your readers while you're doing that. And that means, depending on your audience, that may mean having very direct call outs or not including it. It may mean just being very kind of clear that this is not meant to be a guidebook to who to date in your life. And some of it just means being really clear in your advertising that this is maybe not for everybody, maybe not for all audiences. And then just kind of generally watching how far you go, because it can be really easy to step over that line because you, the author or the creator, are very caught up in how exciting this is. And then you don't realize that for people who do not live in your head, there's not enough on that page to justify what you just did.
I would also add that, as a writer, one of our top goals is always to write characters that are believable and authentic. And that goes for the villains too. We're trying to write characters, whether it's through their backstory or their belief systems or mental illnesses or whatever it is, that's compelling them to see the world they see it or do the things, make their choices that they're choosing. We want that to be believable and realistic. Part of that is that those choices and those actions should also come with believable and realistic consequences. And maybe those are legal consequences in the story world. Maybe those are, being, shamed from other characters in the story world, whatever it is. If your villains are doing something that is truly reproachable, then that's something that you should be seeing, through the context of the story.
It's like the core of what we're doing, really, isn't it? It's just we're exploring human nature through hypothetical situations.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
If any story goes on long enough with a villain that manages to stay in a serialized format, it seems like eventually a topic that's going to come up is the idea of redemption. Particularly if you're in a medium where a character takes off in popularity, becomes a fan favorite, and sooner or later they're going to want to see maybe them make a stumble into the light in some way. And some of the most popular villains have kind of made that crossover, right? And I think it says a lot about what we look for in stories about redemption, but we don't necessarily see socially in real life a lot of leeway in the redemptive kind of category. So I want to know what you guys think about the idea of redeeming these characters, where the story allows us to find forgiveness and why we want to forgive. Is it because the character deserves it, or are they just really hot?
Well, my show is famous for doing that with pretty much all of our villains, including people who are now part of the main cast, where many of them were villains on other shows. So yes, we are very familiar with this. We just kind of can't help ourselves. I mean, again, we are a room that is about or 3/4 Hufflepuffs, and we love these characters. And yes, even when out of the gate they have again that very flawed vision of the world and how they want to remake it in their image, we also love to build them out as real people who have real issues and real, again, the building blocks are always there. A character like Damien Dark, who was on Arrow as this super mustache, he doesn't have a mustache, but he was very mustache twirly, he was super evil and did awful things on Arrow. But then when we got our hands on him on Legends of Tomorrow, he became a little goofier. He started, he got this much deeper relationship to his family, and he became this much more playful character. And again, we took him on this arc that ended in him making this huge sacrifice at the end of one of our seasons in order to help the Legends save the day and save his daughter. Really, but it was because he did it for his daughter. That was his emotional Achilles heel, was her. So I feel like if you can build a character that has that thing that makes them human, that thing that makes us totally relate to them. Again, he did terrible things, but at the end of the day, when he made that sacrifice, you were there with him. It was emotional, and it was okay, Damien, yeah, we get you. That was redemptive, because you did end up sort of sacrificing yourself to save the world, and your daughter. So, and we have this problem a lot on our show where villains don't really stay villains. We can't help ourselves. Yeah.
You bring up the sacrifice, and I think we see that so often, and it's such a wonderful story moment and such a wonderful way to get that redemption moment. It's rarely enough for, a villain, someone who's done horrible things, to just wake up one day and oh, you know what? I changed my mind. I'm going to go work for Greenpeace now. It has to be more than that. There has to be an action that actually shows, that human side, and shows the part of them that we can truly empathize with and truly think there is something in you that is still good and heartfelt and true.
Yeah, we like to watch a character struggle and go for things, achieve them at times, fail at other times. And a villain on a redemption arc, that's what they are. They're this great powder keg of possibilities of, are they going to be able to resist falling back into their old ways? Are they not? But there's a limitation in storytelling, which is, in real life, if you need to make amends, it's very difficult. It may never succeed. And it's constant small actions over time to the people that you've hurt, or on behalf of, because maybe they're never going to want to see your face again and they don't want you in their life. And that's perfectly reasonable. But when you're trying to tell a story, we're always creating an abstraction. And some villains are not going to have a believable redemption arc because what they've done has just been too bad. There are lines that audience members won't cross. In other cases, you know, something that in real life would be unforgivable is forgivable within context and by the choices we're making of which sacrifices we're showing, even if those may not, like, they wouldn't really work in real life. But it's an interesting line to walk. I tend to just go with like small scale storytelling. So it's just the person who's been hurt, the one who's deciding on the redemption. And I don't go beyond that, because if it's something where this person has literally controlled the entire world and committed genocide, I don't know if you can pull off a redemption arc for a genocidal maniac. Or if you do, if it's going to be satisfying to people. Like if you
challenge accepted. You would. Totally would. It's really interesting that you asked this question, especially with the sort of dawn of cancel culture going on right now, because there is this prevalence of somebody, you know, makes an error and, you know, society at large kind of does like the scarlet letter thing. Like, we're just this person's done. I'm okay with canceling like Donald Trump. That's fine. But I wonder too, in these sort of moments when I see even within the writing community, we have a lot of people who are coming in because, especially in kid lit, they're trying so hard. We are all trying so hard to be more inclusive and to change these, you know, terrible numbers that show that the vast majority of books that are written for kids are written with white protagonists in mind, and where the heroes are always cis white, heteronormative. And I'm really, really ready to see that change. It's something that I love to do in all of my books. You'll notice that like all of my books are from all over the world because I'm a child of mixed race and I didn't see that when I was growing up. And I think that the cancel culture around this, when it's not done properly or like that, you know, there's almost like a racial purity aspect to it that really sort of frustrates me. It's not to say that like, you know, I think that anyone can write any book as long as you do the work behind it. And that involves doing the research. And Jackie Woodson famously said that if you're going to write a book about my life and my story, I hope you've sat at my table and broken bread with my family and you understand the sound of my uncle's laugh and the way my mother's kitchen smelled. It's just, that's what you need to be doing with your work. And it's sort of a tangent to all of us. I think that with cancel culture right now, we're really, really quick to not allow people to have that redemptive arc. And we don't do that as much in our books and our entertainment. And it's sort of interesting.
Well, and then also, I mean, back to the whole, who are you making amends to with cancel culture? Does that impact at all the people who you think were hurt?
Yeah.
Depending on who's making the decision. Is it coming from the group that has suffered in some way, or is it because someone's decided that group must have suffered?
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I know that's been part of the ongoing discussion of who makes those decisions and why do they make those decisions and how do they enact those decisions?
Well, I feel like we're leaving you guys with some heavy stuff to ponder. So I'm hoping we've all grown together here. As we finish up here, I want to know real quickly, because we have like a minute, where all of you guys are at for the rest of the show and where they should be finding you, whether it's here or beyond online.
So I am mostly just on Twitter at SEE_Starling. It was a maybe not well thought out pun when I created my Twitter, but it's on my book now. So that's where you'll find me. This is my only panel. Thank you.
This is my last panel, and I'm on mostly Instagram these days at Marissa Meyer Author.
This is my last panel as well, so you'll find me forever and a day at the next taco stand. So I think I am on Instagram too. It's at Renée Ahdieh. And I am on Twitter, but I'm mostly just retweeting things and railing about politics. If you enjoy that kind of stuff, you should follow me on Twitter. Otherwise, don't. It's really bad. It's not good. Twitter's a bad place to be right now.
This is my last panel, and it's also my first panel.
This is
my.
You did so amazing.
I think they might be out of copies of Mage Against the Machine at the Simon & Schuster booth, but maybe if you like bug them, they'll get more. I don't know. So this is it. You can find me online at Shaun Barger, like Shaun of the Dead with a U, weird spelling. Shaun Barger. Yeah. So pick up a copy of Mage Against the Machine. Good Kid Mage City is going to come out next year. Yeah, that's what I got going on. So, thank you.
Yeah, you can follow me at Keto Mizu is both my Twitter and my Instagram. And I tweet about mostly the show, updates on the show. And then my Instagram, you'll see my son and my dog and a lot of food and also some stuff about the show. But yeah, if you're into any of that, there you go.
Well, thank you guys so much for bringing a great audience. Please give it up for our panelists here. Had a great discussion. Go out and enjoy the rest of your San Diego Comic-Con 2019.
This has been Season 4, Episode 8 of Fictitious. This and all previous episodes are available at fictitiouspodcast.com, along with news and events, articles, and more. Listen to Fictitious on Apple Podcasts, Google Play, and Spotify, or search for the show using your favorite app. Stay connected to all things Fictitious on Twitter or Instagram, where you'll find us as @FictitiousPod. You can also chat about books, fandom, and any other nerdy stuff directly with me on my personal account @AdrianBusky. If you enjoy Fictitious, please share this episode on social media, tell your friends, or write us a review, or all three. All those things support the authors who appear on the show, and you'll help me to grow the podcast. Next week, writer Helly Kennedy joins me to talk about her work on the new cereal box production Orphan Black, The Next Chapter, which continues the story of the hit television series in a unique serialized fiction format. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. I'm Adrian Busky. Thanks for listening to Fictitious.